If you have a billion-dollar corporation and yet are imposing a small financial penalty on them, that is the cost of doing business. They're not going to change their behavior.
When award-winning filmmaker Susie Singer Carter placed her mother, who was living with dementia, in a 5-star nursing home in Los Angeles, she never expected to be dealing with substandard care, inadequate staffing, and chemical restraints. Horrified by what was happening, Susie contacted former federal prosecutor Rick Mountcastle, whose prosecution of Purdue Pharma was featured in the miniseries Dopesick. Susie and Rick have collaborated on the new documentary No Country for Old People to raise awareness about failures in our long-term care system and spur action to promote quality and accountability. On the eve of the release of the documentary, join a conversation with Susie and Rick about what they've learned in this process and what you can do to help change the system.
All right, well, hello, and welcome to today's episode of Pursuing Quality Long-Term Care, a podcast of the National Consumer Voice for Quality Long-Term Care. I'm Lori Smetanka with the Consumer Voice, and we're really thrilled today to be talking about the new documentary film, No Country for Old People, which highlights some of the really serious systemic problems faced by many individuals living in nursing homes. And it's been told through the story of Norma Pecora and her family during the last 6 months of Norma's life. And today, my special guests that we're going to be talking to are the film's creators and producers, Susie Singer Carter, who is also Norma's daughter, and a multi-award-winning filmmaker, writer, director, producer, actor, podcast producer, host, and caregiver advocate. Susie, I'm exhausted just listing all of the things that you do. You have so much energy. And also we're joined by former U.S. Attorney Rick Mountcastle, who also has as distinguished a resume as Susie. And Rick led the prosecution of OxyContin maker Purdue Pharma and its top executives, as chronicled in the Emmy-nominated miniseries Dopesick, as well as the criminal and civil prosecutions of Abbott Laboratories for the fraudulent marketing of the drug Dopesick as a chemical restraint to treat agitation in dementia patients in nursing homes. And could not have two better people who were behind the making of this film. And Susie and Rick, thanks so much for joining me today. It's good to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you, Lori. It's great to be here.
Well, thanks so much. Well, some of our listeners may remember that we all talked as you were beginning this project a couple of years ago, and we're really thrilled to say that the film is complete and getting ready to be made public and start streaming. And we want people to refresh themselves with the content and to watch it and to start to take action. And so, Susie, let's remind people what got you interested in creating this film.
Mm-hmm. Well, for me, it was being kind of sucker punched when my mom was going through the last 6 months of her life, which was right on the, towards the tail end of COVID, and having been her caregiver for 16 years with Alzheimer's. She had a very long journey with it. I knew my mom very well, and I could see during COVID that she was starting like exponentially. Her health was going downhill, and I had no control. And once that, a lot of things happened at once, starting off with a pressure sore, which I didn't even know what a pressure wound was at the time. I had no idea the implications of it. And that became, just a slippery slope for me. I couldn't keep up with all the things that were happening because of that. And that was, I come to find out is the hallmark of neglect is, a pressure wound, especially as a stage 4 pressure wound. And I couldn't keep up. I didn't know what I was battling against in terms of the system. I just knew that my mom was suffering and that I couldn't help her. And once we got through the 6 months and my mom ultimately passed away, I, as you said, I have a podcast, which is called Love Conquers Alls, which is about Alzheimer's. And I had seen the miniseries on Hulu, Dopesick, and I saw in the final episode that the main character, played by Peter Sarsgaard, which is Rick Mountcastle, they were talking about their next case, which was going to be another pharmaceutical, and that, as you mentioned, was at Abbott Labs and the off-marketing of Depakote. Well, my mom was a victim of Depakote, and so and that's what put her in a wheelchair and made her incontinent, and really it exasperated her cognitive ability, and so all the things that happened. So I thought I need to talk about this. I was unaware until I was told by my mom's doctor, do you know that she's on this drug? It's a black label drug. Can we take her off? I said, yes, please, right? So it was lovely to have Rick. I reached out to him, he came on, and then my world opened up because he really explained to me what was going on with my mom and the facility that she was at, which, by the way, everybody, was a 5-star facility in Los Angeles. So, you would expect, I thank God every night. I was like, thank God my mom's in this wonderful place. I can sleep at night. And then, Rick made it very clear that it wasn't just my mom's facility, it was the system.
Right,
And
right.
I needed to tell the story. I needed to, because I thought, if I don't, then I felt almost culpable that I don't say anything.
Let's rewind just a little bit. Your mom had dementia and you cared for her at home as long as you could. And then the point came when you needed extra help and were looking for the best place you could find her.
Mhm.
And as you said, you did your due diligence. You found a 5-star nursing home and placed her there, as many families do, with the expectation that their loved one is going to get the care that they need, that they're going to be well cared for, that they're going to have, good life at the whatever time they have left. And unfortunately, that just wasn't your experience.
No, not at all.
Hmm.
And COVID really, and I was very involved in the community because I had, recently before that, I had produced and directed a film about Alzheimer's, and I wanted to destigmatize that, and with a film with Valerie Harper, and this was scripted, but I became very involved with the idea of trying to destigmatize
Hmm.
cognitive disabilities, and to really open up people's eyes that these people are still living there, enjoying their lives. There's just other ways that they're living differently, and so I felt very, very, very much in love with the community. and
Hmm.
and when I saw what was happening, that also was very important to me, to keep the conversation going, and to, because ableism, the stigmatization of cognitive disabilities is real, and exists not only in our public but in the healthcare system. So people,
Hmm.
with dementia tend to be marginalized in terms of their care. And
Right, absolutely. And that happens very frequently. And as you mentioned, you met Rick, who was a guest on your podcast. And, Rick, in the work that you did, and I can see why it led you to Susie's podcast, in terms of your experience with not only OxyContin, but particularly Depakote, because that, chemical restraints are a very serious issue that we hear about in nursing homes all the time, with people with dementia. And so, talk about how you then became interested in working on the film with Susie and getting involved in this project.
Well, I was an innocent bystander, basically. Um, and in late 2021 to early 2022, I, out of the blue, without any expectation, completely taken by surprise by the fact that uh, Dopesick had come out and was making such an impact. And I had retired from the U.S. Attorney's Office at the end of 2018, was working for the Virginia Attorney General, and started receiving contacts from people, about the opioid crisis. And then, Susie kind of contacted me on LinkedIn out of the blue, related to Abbott. Um, and so I was kind of thinking to myself, I've got this 15 minutes of fame that I never expected. never asked for, what do I do with it? And so I made the decision that I would do anything I could to talk to and help victims from wherever they were, opioid crisis, nursing homes, Depakote, whatever, and that I would try to, get involved in education. I said, let me make this 15 minutes of fame that's now 3 years long as productive as possible. And so when Susie reached out to me on LinkedIn and said, I'm interested in having you come on a podcast called Love Conquers Alls, at that time, that was all new to me. And so, but I said, sure, absolutely. I'm happy to come on and talk about that. So that's kind of the catalyst. It was not something I ever looked for, applied for, expected, but when, coming on the podcast, and then afterwards, Susie contacted me when she was going through the crisis with her mother, and that's when we started kind of communicating about, this is a systemic crisis. Let me walk you through what's happening, why things are happening based on my experience, because I also prosecuted nursing home owners, as well as pharmaceutical companies, and as well as Abbott Labs. And so in the course of those conversations, and I think even on the podcast, when I talked about the systemic crisis, Susie asked, well, what can we do to change this? What can we do to
Right.
make things better? And that was like, that's a really good question. What can we do? Obviously, doing these individualized cases isn't changing the system. It's helping those people who are involved in those cases. But how do we change this system to help everybody? So that conversation, I think we had a number of times and talked about, how do we do this? And so finally we came to we've got to change people's attitudes. We've got to educate people. People need to know what's going on, because they really don't unless you're caught up in the middle of it. Unless you have a loved one who is going through it, unless you're going through it as a caregiver, unless you're going through it yourself, you don't know.
Right.
And so you don't have change unless the public knows about it, and the public demands change, because the industry, which is making so much money from it, does not want to change things as long as they're making money. And so we have to go to the public. And so we just talked about how is the public getting their information today? What about that next generation that's coming up and who are going to be caregivers and who are going to need care down the road? How do we reach them? And so we talked about the use of media, the use of film, podcasting, YouTube videos, and decided, let's try to make a dent. Let's try to move the needle with a documentary, which now is a docu-series, three-part docu-series. So that's how I got involved. It was like kind of just, I guess, walking through doors that got opened.
Right. Well, and that's how you take advantage of opportunity, right? As you walk through those doors. And, Susie, I would imagine that because of your background and your interest in art and film, that taking video is just a normal part of your everyday experience with your family. And my guess is that, and even from watching the film, the videos that you were taking with your mother just started as a normal part of cataloging her life, right? Just your experience
100%.
with her, and that's just part of what you just always did with her. And then you can see as you're moving through the film that it really started to capture things were going wrong.
Right. Well, it's interesting because, yeah, you're absolutely right. We're we love memorializing, and we love to do that. This is the modern scrapbook. And our other partner, Don Priest, who has been a producer with us, and he is my dear friend forever, lifelong friend. And he was with me on this journey with my mom, and often, being a filmmaker as well, always taking video and what happened was, a lot of things get memorialized that you didn't realize were that important later on. Things that you go, wait a minute, did you see that, what I just saw? And and Don was quite often, taking video, and which actually one of his videos becomes really the through line for the opening of the documentary. And that was not planned. It wasn't thought, and it's so organic. And that's why I think it's powerful, is because it is organic and it really comes out of real moment. And so I think at that all that stuff was such good material for us, and very powerful. And then Rick had said, as an attorney, he was saying when things were starting to go really crazy, where I couldn't keep up, I was in crisis, which, by the way, I'm sure you talk about this all the time, is the worst time to make decisions.
Right.
Crisis, and you are taking the lowest hanging fruit that you can because you want things to be okay. And that's not a good time to make decisions. But Rick was saying, you should really start, documenting things. This is not right, that's not right. You should start documenting. And so at that point, I started to do it with a motivation behind it. Like, okay, then I'm going to turn my phone on when I think something's going wrong. And
Mhm.
but that was really not the majority of it. It wasn't like I went in there as an undercover. It
Right.
wasn't. So I do think that the most powerful parts are the parts that we were just memorializing and not really realizing, wow, these tell a story.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it certainly shows the devotion that you had to your mother, that the rest of your family had. You're very close-knit family, and we're really looking out for the best for her. So talk a little bit about, some of the issues. I mean, you did mention source started developing, but talk a little bit about some of the issues that you started to see happening while your mother was in the facility.
Mhm. Well, we saw this during COVID. It was a rapid decline during COVID, because although she was wheelchair bound because of the DEPA code, because before that she was very healthy physically.
Mhm.
Um, I was noticing every week on our weekly Zoom, which that's all we got, that now she was in bed every time at 3 in the afternoon. And I kept asking the CNA, why is mom in bed? And, oh, I don't know. Let me find out. I think maybe she's got a sore. I don't know. Nobody knew.
Mhm.
And understandably now, because they were understaffed, they were overwhelmed, and they were keeping everybody in their rooms and basically in their beds. If they were immobile, they were in their beds. She wasn't dressed. Her hair wasn't brushed, so I just started to see what was going on. And then when I finally was available, when we were allowed to see them in person, that's when I noticed such a decline in her, and I could see that she was not taken care of. She wasn't bathed, it was like they knew I was coming, so they threw on a shirt and like put some powder on her face, but there was food on crust on her face. And can I just say this? She had someone else's dentures in her mouth.
Oh my goodness.
Mhm.
The other
Wow.
thing, I think the pressure sore is really problematical because the family wasn't told. Okay. I mean,
Mhm.
when you get a stage one, there should be a report to the family. Well, this
Right.
was a stage four, and the first time it became evident was when Norma was sent to the
Uh-huh.
emergency room, and the emergency room, the hospital, not the facility, reported it. So that's one thing. And of course, she was dehydrated and had sepsis and um,
10% kidney function and
yeah, decreased
pneumonia.
kidney function. But the issue, the thing about it is that again, for your viewers, don't rely on staff, don't rely on reports. You have to look at your loved one and you have to check them, head to toe if you can, and make sure there isn't a developing pressure sore, because when it gets to be stage four, it's almost too late, really,
Mhm.
for
Mhm.
for an elderly person once they get to a stage four. And
Mhm.
it should never happen, but it seems to happen all too often. So
Right.
So
yeah,
Rick is, in the work that you've done, prosecuting nursing homes that have, for neglect, for, failure to provide care. As Susie was sharing some of the different things that were happening with her mom, the understaffing, the lack of care being provided, was that really systemic for what you had seen in the work that you had been doing, in your prosecutions?
absolutely. What I saw was that it's about money. And so an owner, especially a new owner who's taken over, I was involved in investigating a rural facility that had been taken over by an out-of-town owner. And so, and it was an owner that was set up, had several facilities across 3 or 4 states, and obviously it was to generate cash. And so the first place that a nursing home owner goes to generate cash is staff, because that's the biggest expense.
Mhm.
If the bulk of your money comes from federal programs like Medicaid and Medicare for rehab, those are all fixed. You can't do much. They can't do much to increase those. Those are all fixed by law and regulation, and they come in on a regular basis. You know that you don't have to do collection. Those checks are going to come in. So if you want to increase profit, you cut costs, and the biggest cost is staffing.
Right.
And then the other things to look out for is if there's not enough supplies. They cut, there were no, not enough washcloths. Washcloths weren't available. Or if you hear from that staff is having to go out to Sam's Club and buy diapers because
Yeah.
they're not provided in the facility, that means that the ownership is neglecting that they're cutting the costs down to the point where there's just not even enough supplies. And of course, food is another place to be looking at. You go, if they're cutting costs, the food is going to be just obviously bad.
Right.
Um, and so that's the problem. And the money that, and you've done, National Consumer Voice has done a lot of work with this, very good work with where does the money, our Medicare and Medicaid money, go once it goes to
Right.
the nursing home? Well, it's these related party transactions that are being used to, as one of the study authors put it, tunnel profits out secretly because they look like expenses, but actually end up in the pockets of the owners. And so those are
Mhm.
things that, if you're shopping for a nursing home, it doesn't matter whether it's a 5-star, whether it's a profit or so-called nonprofit, they all across the board, those are things that happen in those kinds of facilities.
And
Abs-
if I
Go
can
ahead,
add on to
Susie.
that, in terms of like cutting back, on uh, resources like food, even,
Yeah.
it played into my mother's, lack of quality of care, because when she was released from the hospital, my mom had no problem eating. She lived to eat. There was no problem with it. She had to be intubated because she had pneumonia. Well, because she couldn't speak for herself, because I wasn't allowed in there to advocate into the hospital because it was still COVID, they gave her a feeding tube, and I didn't even know that until she was
Mm.
released. When she was released, the nursing home told me they couldn't approve removing the feeding tube. And I said, why? She eats perfectly.
Mm.
And she wants to eat. It's not like she didn't want to. She was like a little bird wanting to eat. And I was going in and feeding her. They forbid me to feed her, or I should take her home.
Wow.
For 6 months, my mom was under NPO, no water, nothing, unless I came in. And they finally allowed me, after they finally gave her an evaluation from a speech therapist, who basically said, yeah, you're right, she's swallowing, but I wouldn't trust anybody else. I'll allow you to give her liquid from a sponge. So my mom was left to have some liquid to suck off of a sponge, and that was it. And so she had no quality of life, because eating was her life. Like, my
Mhm.
God, like that is so important to all of us. It is, it's a brain stem thing that we have. That is what we do. And they just wouldn't allow it. And that made it very easy for them, because they didn't have to help her eat. They didn't have
Right.
to bring her water. All they had to do was turn the machine on.
Right. Right. Which diminishes, certainly quality of life and
Oh,
as you're saying,
for
and the
sure.
care and her ability to heal herself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
100%. They wanted to do the least amount of work and take the least amount of resources to help her, and basically wanted to just let her, pass away more, more quickly, to expedite her exit, because financially she was a bit of a drain. And so they never brought in a wound doctor, which the hospital kept saying because I asked, is she dying? Like, I didn't want to, I didn't want to put my head in the sand. Like, if mom's dying, let me know and I'll help her through this process. And then the doctors were like, no, she's not. She needs a wound doctor. Here's what she needs. This is what we're going to, write, and let them know. We never got a wound doctor till it was too late, like probably
Hmm.
4 months into her exit out. That
Hmm.
because they kept saying she was going to succumb from it. Well, of course, she would succumb from it if she didn't get help. Yeah. So,
Right. Right.
but these are the ways they cut. And this also shows the ableism and, the marginalization of somebody with, dementia, because
Right.
they're dismissed.
Absolutely. Well, the three of us have, talked at length over the last couple of years as you started doing the film about some of the different issues that you saw. And at Consumer Voice, we weren't surprised certainly by any of the things you had seen. A lot of nursing homes, maybe most nursing homes are understaffed. They don't have enough necessary to provide care based on the acuity of the people that they're serving. But as you both were developing this film, you did a lot of homework and research and, talked to a lot of different experts. And so what did they all tell you as you were, talking to just person after person about your mom's experience and what you were seeing in this nursing home? What was the response that you were getting from the experts?
I'll start, you can go, Rick. I'll just say everybody like you, like National Consumer Voice, the experts who were open and honest said, yeah, this is the standard of care, sadly. We hear this all the time, every day, every day. And as we began to interview more and more people, more and more families, I was getting the same stories, the very same stories. And so I realized, this is not my mom's story. This is everybody's story. And Rick, I'll let you take it from there in terms of.
No, I think that's correct. I mean, it was basically there's a theme that maybe and okay, so look, maybe there are some good nursing homes out there,
Hmm.
but the problem is they are too few and too far between,
Hmm.
and very difficult to find. Um, so you have a system, and the other part of the system is the lack of enforcement,
Yeah.
because the Nursing Home Reform Act that sets the federal standards for nursing homes, as we know, has been around for 50 years, more or less. And so there are things that could be done on the enforcement end to make sure that the standards are kept. But unfortunately, I think what it is that because the enforcers, the ombudsman and the state regulators, the departments of health and the surveyors are so overwhelmed and they see this kind of thing so often, the standards have gone down to the point where, when I was at the Attorney General's office in the state program after I retired from the feds, I was looking at nursing homes and talking to families who would come in and they would say to me, well, we went and visited, we go to visit, mom in the nursing home or grandmom in the nursing home, um, every day during the week, 5 days a week. And during a month, there'll be about 5 times they would go in where she's sitting in soiled clothing. And my response was, I'm sorry, but that's the standard of care now. The standard of care is such that a resident of a nursing home who has to have assistance going to bathroom is going to have their clothes soiled because there's nobody to take them to the bathroom a certain number of times a month. And that's, if you think about it, how dehumanizing, how
Yeah.
demeaning, how ridiculous and outrageous that we now accept that our regulators accept that as, oh, it's okay, that's just the way it is. And so that's another part of the motivation, I think, for us to say, no, that can't be satisfactory. We cannot accept that kind of treatment. And you're talking about taking away people's dignity.
Right.
And we
Just,
can't,
yeah, we can't do that. You got to put yourself there. How would you feel if you, oh, we don't have enough people to give you a shower, so you're only going to get one shower this week. Are you
or
kidding me?
or month.
Or a month.
Right.
A month.
Right.
And the thing is that, there's a lot of the ageism that comes in and and we're all guilty of at some point where it's like, well, at least, they're 89 or they're this or they're that age. And it's, like we decide that their life is over. We've made the decision. We've made the decision that they don't deserve dignity anymore. We make those decisions when, and I keep trying to tell people, I try to, anecdotally say, if you watch, This Is 40, the movie This Is 40, and grandma walks in and they're like, how are you, grandma? She goes, blink and you're 90. And that's true, blink and you're 90. And do you want to live like that? We are extending our lives, but to what end if we're going to bad place? And I want to also say that about good facilities, the people that are working in those better facilities because their community has created this atmosphere of wanting to care, they're still up against the system, and these frontline providers, CNAs and doctors and nurses, are experiencing moral injury because they can't do the job that they want to do. And so, right. And so many of them, and they're not paid well, they're not respected, they're not given, benefits that they deserve. They're overworked. How can they possibly do the job that they want to do? And so they either leave, like many, have, like, there's been an exodus, especially since COVID, of people leaving the industry. It just doesn't, it's so difficult emotionally to work in a place like that. And so that is, they are just almost as victimized as the residents.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we definitely know that the working conditions in many of the nursing homes are poor, and because people are not paid, they don't have job quality, the workloads are way too much for them to handle, and they don't get the support that they need. And so, we do need to see systems change. And I think, that's one of the things that your film really does show, because as you said, Rick, we have good laws in place. I mean, the reform law is actually a very good law, but it's not enforced properly. And the systems that are designed to help support it are overworked and underfunded. And there's, the nursing home industry and the long-term care industry has a lot of money and resources and power. And it is really important to get the public behind the demand for raising expectations in terms of what they should expect when they are living in a long-term care facility, especially when you think about how much money goes into this public money, not only, our individual money, but, public money goes in billions, hundreds of billions of dollars a year. And when you think about a nursing home bed costing about $100,000 a year, and what are we getting for that money?
Right.
Yeah.
And then the word warehousing comes up. You can't help but feel that way. And I know it sounds very harsh, but that's what it feels like when you've got people that are making money for you, but you're not giving them the service that that they're supposed to be getting, that the money is supposed to be providing that for them.
Mhm.
You did a talk about not long ago, which really, I'm very moved by this, by Kirk Douglas. And this is like what, for, again, 1985, he was doing a film. I just want to bring it up because I think it's very emblematic of what we're trying to say, is that this hasn't changed in so long. And here was this incredible guy who always was a humanitarian, who
Mhm.
was playing a character who was living in a nursing home and was being neglected and abused. And when he found out that wasn't fiction, that this was actually minimized in the project that he was in, and that it was actually worse, he marched himself to Congress and like literally said, what is going on? You need to bring in commandos, like
Right.
get in there, like in there, and then I know that I read the article because I was so intrigued by what had brought up, and like he was saying, they said, well, what do you expect us to do? Like, what's your recommendation? I don't know. I'm an actor. I'm just letting you know about it. Like, there's experts, like, Consumer Voice. There's a lot of answers. Like, but this has got to stop. Like,
Right.
this is hideous. And
Absolutely.
I was just, and then now look at us 45 years later, what is it? Almost 50 years later. And no, 40 years later, we are in the same position and possibly worse.
Right, right. I think what we keep hearing from residents who live in facilities, and I say this, a lot, is they want people to know when they can tell you what they want. They want people to know that they want you to treat them the same way you would want to be treated.
Yes,
And so if it is not what is happening in facilities today, if it would not be acceptable for you, it should not be acceptable for the person that's in that room, in that bed today. And so we need to do better and be raising the expectations and helping to fulfill the promise of what the reform law is supposed to be providing for people that live in long-term care facilities. So,
amen. I mean,
yeah.
that's why I say, Lincoln, you're 90, because we are all the same. And when you don't pay attention to this, you're actually hurting your future self.
Mhm.
You are not doing yourself any justice, because you will be in that position, the same position, and you will be marginalized, and you will be said, well, you are 85.
Right, right. So your film really does a great job of kind of walking through what happened in your mother's experience, giving other family stories, talking to a lot of experts, um, you know, and so let's talk about, I mean, the film is done. So congratulations. This was
So
a
much.
huge undertaking for both of you. So let's talk about how people can see it and where will it be shown? And what should they expect?
Right. So there was so much material. We thought it was going to be a traditional length of film. It is now a 3-part docuseries on Amazon. It's going to launch on August 1st on Amazon. So you will get a breather in between each part to take a breath and digest it, and then go and quickly watch the next two, because and we don't leave you feeling horrible, because there is a way out of this. It's just going to take everybody, and it's been done before, and if we can do it again, we can prevail. We are powerful as a community. So I think so then it's going to, after that, the first couple of weeks it'll be on Amazon, and then it's going to start leaking, it's going to be released on other platforms that you'll be able to see, actually internationally. So
Great.
yeah, and
Mhm.
we'll let everyone know as it rolls out. But um, we're trying to make it as available as possible,
Mhm.
and so that everybody has an opportunity to see it and share it.
Yeah, terrific. I think it's certainly something that folks are going to want to watch. So I know that we'll share information about it on Consumer Voice's website. But could you tell folks your website also for the film?
Yes, it's No Country for Old People.com, and there's also we are launching a movement called ROAR, which stands for Respect, Oversight, Advocacy, and Reform for Long-Term Care. And we are in the beginnings of this fight. We're doing a nonprofit, so this is a process, but we are collecting warriors So who will raise their voice and roar for people who don't have a voice. And so if you want to be a part of this movement, along with Consumer Voice, who is our Bible in terms of data and resource, and we couldn't do this without you. We just want to, and you can also go to Consumer Voice and upload stories there as well. But we're trying to get outside of our echo chambers and get into the public. And if people want to be active, then be a warrior with us and go to the website, and there's a page that will talk about that and what we intend to do. And because all of this advocacy, we need to do it together. We
Right.
can't go alone. We can't do it without Consumer Voice, or all of the other incredible organizations that have been working so hard and so long. Canner and
Right.
that we
Absolutely. We need to all be working together.
together.
And there's room for everyone to be
Oh, there's
advocating.
way room for
Yeah,
everyone.
We
absolutely.
need to have everyone. I mean,
Yeah,
the only way you're going to fight hundreds of millions of dollars in campaign contributions and lobbying that the industry puts in to keep things the same, the only way to fight that if you don't have the money, which we don't, is to gather the community and make the community that we talk to and that are part of our movement as large as possible. So everyone needs to get involved together.
hmm
Have a
Very
voice,
well said. Say
roar with
again.
us. Be a warrior.
Be a
Okay?
warrior.
Be a
Yeah,
warrior. Yeah, we got to do it, and we can't do it without you. We just literally simply can't. Oh, I
absolutely.
also want to say we're so, we talked about this before we started recording, but we're very proud that we have voices behind us like Jane Fonda and Lily Tomlin and Lisa Gibbons, Danny Strong, who is responsible for Dopesick, and there'll be more on. Sophia Robb is also going to be doing an endorsement for us, and I'm sure there'll be more. But that these are people that know and understand and really want to help amplify. So we are in good company, and we're very proud of that, and hope that makes it even more legitimate if I had to make it more legitimate. So
Well, congratulations on all of the hard work, and it's really glad to see the project come to fruition and be on the verge of being made available so that people can see the documentary that you've put so much of your heart and souls into. And thanks for all that work. And for people listening, we do definitely encourage you to watch it. It's going to show on Amazon starting on August 1st, and then will be available after on other platforms after a couple weeks as well. Um, and you can find more information about how to get help or things that you can do to get better care on the Consumer Voices website. You can also share your stories because that's the most important thing, is sharing your story so that we can effectuate change and we can get more people behind all of us and all of the work that we're doing. So
how we
thanks so
touch
much.
hearts, right? That's how we
That's
touch
right.
hearts.
Yeah, absolutely. So Susie and Rick, thank you so much for all of the work that you've done in pulling this together, and for your dedication and your advocacy and your partnership. And look forward to seeing the final product when it starts showing on Amazon on August 1st. And I know we'll
Thank,
be talking again soon.
thank you, definitely, and thank you for being our fiscal sponsor and being so supportive, and our partner, because literally could not have done it without you. So thank you.
Well,
Thank
we
you,
were
Lori.
glad to be a part of it, and thanks so much for your partnership in this and for such a job well done. So.
Thank you.
Great. Well, so folks, go watch it on Amazon starting on August 1st, and you'll hear more again from Susie and Rick and the Warriors and from Consumer Voice as we all move forward. So thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for joining us on Pursuing Quality Long-Term Care. This podcast is a program of the National Consumer Voice for Quality Long-Term Care. Consumer Voice is a nonprofit organization and depends on our members and donors for support. To contribute to this podcast and our work, make a donation at theconsumervoice.org/donate. Every dollar helps. And make sure to visit our website, theconsumervoice.org/pursuingquality, where you can subscribe to the podcast, follow us on social media, and find more information and resources. If you enjoy the podcast, please rate, review, and subscribe. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next episode.